G'day legends, I hope that you're well. I know it's been a couple of days since I've done sort of a breakdown of what's going on and some things in the media. So we'll jump into that, and the main focus of what today's video is going to be about is that I believe, and the numbers are basically saying that this war, this invasion, this special operation, however you see it, it doesn't matter to me, however you see it, but that this is going to get far worse for the cost of human life. But look, before we get into that aspect of this and what is backing that up, let's have a look at the map. So today is the 29th of January. We've made it to the end of January. Congratulations. And look, the backwood front has actually been quieter. And I know every time we talk about this, and Willie, why are we talking about this? Because this is where the heaviest fighting is happening. And there are some things on this front that we've actually been seeing and is being reported that is changing. The main one changing is that it looks like Wagner Group is operating less in this area and being more filled positions by Russian conventional forces and Russian paratroopers, the VDV, who, from people I've spoken to who have been in areas with the VDV, particularly guys who are not combatants and they have worked around the VDV, having their passports checked by them, that sort of things, are reasonable professional soldiers. That is the report that I had. Now, I'm not saying that stands for everyone. I'm not saying that stands for the people here. But at the time, talking to those people, that's what they had said, that they were actually fairly professional soldiers, which I can't, vouch either way, but whatever. And that is backfilling in here. Now, is it being used that the Wagner Group need a rest? They've taken massive casualties. We know they've taken massive casualties, but from the guy I spoke to the other day, he was saying the casualties really sustained were these prisoners and conscripts that Wagner had to throw bodies at the problem here, and that the actual Wagner, original forces haven't taken too many. Look, I can't back up what he said in that, although I have had people who are working in Ukraine message me and go, what that guy said was bang on. As well as actually, and I can't say too much on this, but contact from people within Wagner Group reaching out to me as well. So it's all over the place for me at the moment. But I digress. Let's go back to the map. So we haven't seen in the past 24, 48 hours too much movement in Bakhmut. Although the north of Vuhledar, we have seen some movement. And this movement, these small gains, really, and I think most would agree with this, are going into attempt this surrounding of Bakhmut. Now, what I want to look at here is if we go to the topo map that will show the mountains, the hills in this area. Now, I'll say hills, they're not very big. I've been in this area many a times. Now, one of the big reasons that this area was so defensible for so long for the Ukrainians, facing waves and waves of Russian attack over months and months and with very little territorial loss, has been that the Russian artillery guns can sit in something called defilade position. So imagine the gun, this is the hill and the gun's here, and the gun can fire out this way. It is very hard for things to actually hit this gun. You're in a bit of grey zone behind it. Now, I can't back up any of this of where these guns are, but these 155 artillery pieces, you're talking 30 kilometres, 40 kilometres of range. Within that, I'm not an artillery guy, but that is, it's in tens of kilometres. Now, I know there are different systems can fire a lot further and a lot closer, all of that. But looking for this topography, well, you're looking at the back slope of things. Where are these guns going to be? So most likely they're on the eastern side of Chasiv Yar, in here somewhere. And the reason I bring this up is this sort of spike out here from the Russian forces. Now, this spike isn't shown on all maps, but on the deep state map, it is shown. So, look, take that spike with a grain of salt where the Russians are. We're talking only, I believe, to this road, we're talking under 3 kilometres, so 2.6. That hasn't moved since our last video. But one of the important things is this is getting onto the back side of these mountains, of these hills, sorry. So, if we're talking that it's in here where these artillery pieces are, then a lot of the artillery of Bakhmut maybe have to move back to other positions. And as far as defilade positions with these hills, I'm not exactly sure how it's looking more towards Chasiv Yar. There's a band of these hills. It's not just rolling hills. So, what distance we're talking there? 10, 10 Ks, maybe 15 in some areas from where the positions. You got to remember, it's not just point to point. You have a deep front line. You have the last line, which is, the last person before no man's land, and then the enemy on either side. And then you have the front line, which is really any band within artillery range. So that is interesting. But, you can see that over the past couple of days, there has been some small gain, but really stagnant-ish there over the past 24 hours, although it is well known there has been a lot of fighting. Now, the Vuhledar region, and that will be pronounced wrong, this is seen over the past 24, 48 hours with reporting on both sides being all over the place with, Ukraine saying that Russia has run away from this area and Russia saying that there is street fighting winning in this area. There has been a massive point of contention here. Although the map may not reflect this with, small Russian gain, then small Ukrainian gain, both ways, there has been reported and videos and everything of huge fighting in that area. In the south, as far as your Zaporizhia Oblast, there's always fighting. There's always artillery duels both ways. But as far as territorial gains loss, no, there hasn't been that much in the past couple of days. Those gains made in that area of Bakhmut were by brute force with tremendous human life lost. And it does seem that Russia is in the beginnings or mid part of an offensive. Although what we haven't seen is a combined arms offensive or a success from the Russians really since the start of the war. Combined arms is something that our military's learnt the hard way, but is one of, if not the most important thing in combat. Combined arms as far as using Navy, Air Force, Army, and if you've got Marines or not, depending on the force, all together, those combined forces where you've got tanks working with Air Force and the Navy supporting that, and this and that, is incredibly important, incredibly valuable. But what we haven't seen is real Russian success of this combined arms since the beginning of the war. Now, you wouldn't say that it's successful, but what we saw was integration of those combined arms working together. As Ukrainian spring season, their rain season hits in about April, this is when we're going to see some big things happen on the front line. Now, for mechanised warfare, the rain season is really the worst season for this. They can roll across dry fields, they can roll across frozen fields. Mud, rain, really hard for mechanised vehicles. And this is going to go both ways for manoeuvre warfare. And when we're talking manoeuvre warfare, you're talking outmanoeuvring the enemy by infantry fighting vehicles, tanks, Ukraine's new tanks, things like this. But what we're seeing is, will the Russian offensives in the last few weeks and the next few weeks, the next month or so, will that disrupt Ukrainians' ability to conduct these manoeuvre forces once these new vehicles arrive and once Ukraine goes back on the offensive? Because as this is happening, and we're saying that's going to be about 3 months for the German tanks, the American tanks, let's not even worry about that at the moment because it's going to be so far away. As those German tanks, those Western tanks are arriving, we're saying, say 3 months, so we're talking April, May, that's when a lot of the Russian conscripts are coming through from their mobilization, and a lot of troops from the Ukrainian forces who have been in the West training are to arrive. We'll go over numbers on that in a second. But something that I see so much is the celebration of the loss of human lives. Now, I was a soldier in the military. I completely understand that there are cases where people have to die in war. I get that. I do. And I completely agree with Ukraine defending its territory. And if that, in defense, in that self-defense, if that it means killing someone, I completely agree with that. If someone were to invade Australia, I'd take up arms and kill people or be killed for that reason. The same. I completely agree with it. But I don't like the celebration of loss of life. I think that all death of human beings is a tragedy, and I think it is very immature to celebrate this loss on either side. I believe it's still a human. It's someone's kid, it's someone's this, someone that. And to me, it's something that I find a bit disgusting. I can see why it needs to be done. I get it. I get you have the right of self-defense and this and that, whatever. But the celebration of this, and when people are like, I've even seen people, and this is not an isolated case, people going, because Russia has killed this many civilians, we have a right, a quota, quote, a quota to go and kill that many civilians over there. And that is just disgusting. And something thrown around all the time to, I guess, somewhat give some credibility to this war or say that it's not bad is that people on the more pro-Russian side will point at America in Iraq and the amount of civilians, the Iraqi civilians that died in that campaign, that conflict, that war. And this is something that doesn't pass over my head. I completely take that on board, that I will say that that war was unjust and so many civilians died in that. But does, it's an eye for an eye. Does one make one right? No, it doesn't, of course. And, but we should not forget that America did spend $819 billion on war costs in Iraq, and that from direct violence of the coalition and US-led forces, there was between 275,000 and 306,000 civilians killed. And there's other estimates of not just direct violence, but as of violence caused, wider of this, that there's somewhere, the highest estimate is about 1.2 million Iraqis killed, Iraqi civilians killed, which is unbelievable. It's a huge number, and it's something that we shouldn't forget, and I hope that the West would never let happen again. I'm not meaning Western forces, I'm meaning Westerners. People in these countries wouldn't let happen again. And something I also want to point out is that I believe that Putin should hang in the gallows. I also believe that Bush and Blair should be side by side in the gallows for what they have done to undeserving civilian populations. But I'm sick of this excuse given to be an excuse for, giving leeway for this invasion. That is just my opinion on the matter. But where this is going to get worse, and I measure how bad it is by deaths of humans, and the human cost of this is going to get insane. So Russia had its first mobilization in October of 300,000 men, which 150,000 of those men were very basically trained and basically sent onto the front line, whether to man checkpoints or be cannon fodder within that realm. And the other 150,000 were sent off to further training, and we're not sure what really took of that. Now Ukrainian intelligence services are saying as of late January that they plan to mobilize another 500,000 Russian men. Most experts are saying that we will see these conscripted soldiers arrive, around that April-May time. So you could be talking 500,000 new soldiers. But in that same time frame, what we're going to be seeing is Western tanks arriving, more Western support, and as well as, or more importantly, Western-trained Ukrainian soldiers arriving. I've heard numbers, they've already trained 20,000, but I'm hearing numbers of upwards of 60, 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers arriving. Now, it is important to put out that these Ukrainian soldiers will be well-equipped, high morale, and wanting to defend their nation. And these Russian soldiers will have low morale, probably poor equipment, poor training, and that low morale goes into they're not defending their nation. But at the end of the day, you're talking massive numbers on either side. And although people will point out, this is going to be a low-trained, low-equipped force, 500,000 people is still a massive, massive, formidable force to try and fight against. As well as in these numbers is if we see, and a lot of experts are saying we won't see this, but if Belarus were to invade as well or support the Russian offensive as far as giving their own people, not just a launching base for rockets into Ukraine, we would then see another 50,000-ish soldiers from Belarus. Belarus, they have the numbers. They're saying 62 to 65,000, people within their army, but it's like 15,000 that is support staff, not really combat affiliated soldiers. So people are saying somewhere in the realm of 45 to 50,000 actual soldiers, with about 350,000 more in reserve. Now, of course, these are lower trained, lower equipped soldiers, but what I'm trying to put across is these are still bodies, that there could be, run by Putin and Lukashenko, something like 1 million-man army walking onto Ukraine against these great Western weapons, these well-trained, well-equipped soldiers, and that the human cost of this is going to absolutely skyrocket potentially mid-year in the spring offensive that everyone's talking about that Ukraine will most likely launch against the Russians, or offensive from the Russians back. We don't know exactly how it's going to go, but we know that no side in this is budging on what they want to do. The Ukraine is saying, no, we want our pre-2014 borders back, including Crimea, and that we will fight basically down to the last person to push that will expel the Russian invaders, as they would say, and that Russia is basically saying we'll throw men at the problem until the problem goes away. And either way this goes, the human cost is going to be massive. So you're talking, the numbers at the moment, people are saying is about 100,000 Russian soldiers being killed. I know Ukrainian media will say a lot more than that. They're pushing somewhere like 125, 130,000. And I don't know where it floats, but somewhere around there. And through some leaks, through some emails, through some, politicians having stuff up, they're saying that the Ukrainian casualties as well are about 100,000. Now, I also can't back that up with anything, but that is what I'm hearing and reading. So we already know the human cost of this has been absolutely devastating. But in my opinion, we're not even seeing the start of this, because for Ukraine to expel all those Russian soldiers, you're talking 1 million Russian soldiers that you have to kill hundreds of thousands of them to push them out. And the other way is, if Russia really want to take Ukraine and they have success, at the end of the day, the Ukrainian force is not just the people in the front line with the gun. I know Ukrainian people that are like, I'm not a soldier, I'm just sitting here working in a cafe, and I will take up arms against this. So for Russia to actually have some control over that, you're going to be fighting every Ukrainian. So they're going to have to kill hundreds of thousands or millions to have any level of control. And what I'm saying is, either way, the cost of human life is unbelievable, caused by Putin's invasion. The cost on Russian lives, Ukrainian lives, everything is unbelievable, and I believe that he's going to absolutely skyrocket. On that, though, of Ukrainian people taking arms to fight, this is why in the beginning of the war I was uneasy about the Ukrainian government giving instruction and really pushing people into things like Molotov cocktails against the Russian invader. Because that, as soon as you pick up that Molotov cocktail, a Molotov cocktail is a lethal weapon. We learned about this when we were doing like counter-riot courses with the military. Molotov cocktail, lethal weapon. Realistically, you can shoot that person, and that is within your rights. And I think encouraging civilians to sign away their non-combatant civilian status was irresponsible. Although the argument could be made, did that non-combatant civilian status matter to the Russian forces at the time? So I guess that's up for you to have your own opinion on. So I hope that lays out some of these huge numbers that we're going to see come in, and huge numbers of people that will clash in this meat grinder and die. I'm not saying of what we should do or not to do. I completely agree with your right to self-defense as a nation, as a person on the street at the pub, completely. And I do see why war is somewhat inevitable and people will lose their lives. But trying to put these numbers towards the amount of people that are going to die because of this is just unbelievable. And I don't think that should be underestimated, the effect that actually has. It should be understood that is what the reality of war is. Look, thank you very much. I appreciate your time again. Look after yourselves as well. If you want to support me, it's all down below, but you never have to do that. It's just extra support, but you guys being here is enough, and you've changed my life already. So look after yourselves. I'll speak to you soon, and have a good week ahead.